Hey everybody, I'm Chef Tom with allthingsbbq.com, and this is Texas Brisket Chili. That's right, today we are cooking chili Texas style. That means no beans, and if there's one other thing I could think of to make this chili more Texan, it's brisket. So we're gonna kick this thing off by smoking our brisket flat on the Kamado Joe Classic 3. We gotta get that fire going. All right, we're gonna start off today's recipe by smoking our brisket flat low and slow over some Kamado Joe big block charcoal and some chunks of hickory wood. So we'll get our starters fired up and let this thing get going while we trim up our brisket. For today's video, I've picked up a brisket flat that we're gonna be smoking to put in our chili as our beef portion of that chili. Now the flat's a pretty lean piece of meat, so we're gonna make sure that we leave some fat on the outside to add some fat to this chili to really give it the right mouth feel. But we gotta do a little bit of trimming around the fat just to get this thing ready to go. The one that I've picked up today actually has a little bit of the point left on it, which is just lucky for us. I can keep that and grind it up for some burgers. So this down here is the flat portion of the brisket, and you can see right here where they just kind of lopped off the point. But when they did that, they left a bit of that point behind. So we're gonna trim that off, and we can use that for our grind. You could always throw it in your chili, but you gotta remember that the point of the brisket's a lot fattier, so you don't want to add too much fat to your chili. Like that entire chunk right there is entirely fat. We're gonna save that fat back though, because we need a little bit of fat to cook down our onions and our garlic, some of those aromatics in a little bit. And instead of using bacon or just cooking oil, we can use the fat off of this brisket. So I'm looking at that line where the point comes in and meets the flat, and I'm just gonna run my knife right underneath it there. Can kind of let the knife and some gravity do the work on that one. So I'm just trying to stay in the white here in between the two muscles until I find where they completely separate down here at the end. Again, I'm letting gravity do most of the work. Short, easy cuts. And that's just about enough point that we might go ahead and make some burnt ends out of that later. Now we get to the flat. I'm gonna take off some of this hard fat. Again, we're gonna save that stuff to render down to cook our onions in. And then we're just gonna do a little bit of trimming on the surface here. Now you don't have to do any of this if you don't want to. You could always leave that fat on there. We're just gonna make sure that we don't get too much fat on the top. We're not gonna be slicing this for presentation or anything, so I'm not too terribly worried about how it looks on the surface. I just wanna go ahead and give it a light trim, take off some of that silver skin from the backside. All right, sometimes I get a little picky when I start looking at this, when I think I'm done, but honestly, we're gonna be braising this later. We don't need to make it look super nice, so let's get it seasoned up. Now I wanna get a little bit of binder on the surface today, so I'm gonna use some Worcestershire sauce to get our rub to attach. First try. And once we get that surface covered in any sort of liquid, honestly, oil, mustard, whatever you like, I love a little bit of Worcestershire sauce. Then we're gonna get our seasonings down, and we're starting off with a really nice base layer of the AP rub by Killer Hogs. So a finer rub, salt, pepper, garlic, all good things that you need with beef. All right, so every last edge covered in our base layer, and then we're gonna go with something a little bit different. We're gonna have a lot of very earthy flavors going on in this Texas chili today. We're gonna be cooking with coffee, we're gonna be cooking with beer, we've got a lot of chilies that are going into this. So another thing that we could add to the surface of our brisket to really create incredible bark and to add to the flavor of the chili itself is our Cattleman's Grill Smoky Chipotle. This is a coffee-based steak rub. It's got just a little bit of sugar in it, but for the most part, what you're looking for out of this is the chipotle and the coffee. This is gonna put a great bark on the brisket, and that bark's gonna be really important to the flavor of the chili. See, a lot of times when you're cooking a chili or a stew or something like that, you would sear the meat before you would braise it. Today we're not searing, we're smoking. So we gotta create a crust on the outside to add that extra flavor. Again, we're gonna cover all the edges here. We're looking to get the best bark possible out of this brisket to create the best chili possible in the end. And the Kamado is gonna offer a lot of help in that way with that charcoal and hickory smoke. Giving that a couple minutes just to allow it to tack up so we don't lose it as we flip it. And then we're gonna hit that other side. We've got our base layer down already, coming in with the smoky chipotle. All right, let's let that set up. All right, the coals are looking good, so we're gonna get our hickory wood chunks in here. I'm gonna do 2 of these. We wanna wait until those ignite before we close this thing up. We gotta get it set up for indirect cooking. So we're gonna come in and get the slow roller in place. That wood's taken off. You can see the flame on the edges here, so we can go ahead and put our plate on top. And we'll get the divide and conquer in place. And I want these shelves up on the higher setting for smoking. Go ahead and close the air down so we can cool this thing off. So what we're looking to do with this brisket today is not cook it all the way through, but to get a really nice smoke presence on the brisket and to get a bark developed. And that's just gonna take a couple of hours. After that, we'll cube it up, throw it into the chili itself and let it braise until it's super tender. So let's get it on and get it smoking. We're gonna go fat cap down to give us a nice thermal barrier in between the indirect heat and the meat. And once you get this stabilized, you wanna shoot for about 275 to 300 degrees. Now we're gonna get started on the flavor base for our Texas chili, and that's dried chilies. We've got 4 different dried chilies that we're gonna turn into a paste, rehydrate these, and that's really gonna offer the most amount of flavor in our chili. Now we'll have some different aromatics that we're adding later, but this is where it all starts. So what we're working with today are some ancho chilies, and these are essentially dried red poblanos, so fairly mild. Next we have the pasilla. We also have some guajillo, all very mild, and then we've got the arbol chili, which is gonna offer some heat. Now the arbol ones I would say are definitely optional. If you wanna try and make a milder chili that maybe the kids would eat, maybe take some of those out or just leave it out completely. We're also gonna add some chipotles and adobo later that will have a little bit of heat as well, but there are ways that you can control that. If you're looking for a milder chili, just leave out some of those spicier elements. The first thing that we're gonna do to these chilies is just go ahead and get rid of the stems and the seeds. We really just wanna work with the flesh of the chili. Now your dried chilies, while they are dried, they should still have some flexibility to them. They should be kind of like a fruit leather. If they're completely dried out, they can start to lose their potency. So the anchos are probably the most popular dried chili, especially in Mexican cuisine, but not uncommon behind those are the guajillo and the pasilla, and they all have slightly different flavors to them. The pasilla having more of a raisin-like or fruitier sort of flavor profile to it. The guajillo you've seen us use in the past on our homemade chorizo. And we're emptying out the seeds from the arbols as well. These really don't need the extra heat added to them. And by removing the seeds from all of these peppers, we get rid of some of the bitterness that comes out of the dried pepper. We're also going to be rinsing these to make sure that we can minimize the bitterness coming from the pepper. So the next thing we're going to do is get our cast iron skillet going. We want fairly high heat, medium high heat, and we're just going to get all of these peppers in here and start to toast them off, start to awaken those flavors, start to soften the peppers a little bit more, get a nice toast on them. Just a dry, hot skillet. Once they start to become aromatic, you're gonna smell that, you're gonna flip them over and do the same to the other side. All right, we're starting to see just a little bit of smoke, starting to smell these come alive. I'm gonna flip them over and get the other side. And with these chilies, just like everything, honestly, you guys could use other stuff. This is just my take on what we're doing today. It doesn't have to be these 4 chilies. And there's certainly plenty of options out there. but I am quite fond of this combination of chilies. All right, so that doesn't take long. You don't want to scorch these at all, so before you get to that point, go ahead and pour some water over these chilies and just fill that skillet up. This is how we're going to be rehydrating these chilies. Once we've got enough water in there to cover, then turn the temperature all the way up, and we'll throw a lid on top. So bring that up to a boil, and once it's at a boil, cut the heat and let it sit for 20 minutes. All right, well, we've let this sit for about 20 to 30 minutes now, and as you can see, our chilies are rehydrated, nice and flimsy. So from here, what we want to do is transfer these over to some cold water, just to give them a quick little rinse, and then we'll throw them in the blender. So we're just going to try and rinse off some of that bitterness in some fresh water before we transfer them over. And you certainly don't need to do this in a bowl of water. You could just do it in the sink at home. All right, we got all our chilies rinsed off. We're gonna throw those into the blender with 1 cup of fresh, clean water, and we'll light them up. We'll start low and crank it up. And I'm just looking to get a nice, smooth chili paste out of this. All right, looks good. Oh man, super earthy. That's gonna add a ton of flavor to our chili. Well, the brisket's been smoking for about 2.5 hours now. Plenty of time to soak up that smoke and get a really nice bark on the outside. Come take a look. Check that out. Beautiful color on the surface. Great hickory smoke going. Smells incredible. All right, so now that the brisket's off, we're gonna set this up to cook our chili here on the grill. Just give it a little bit of a scrape down. We'll take the divide and conquer out and get rid of the top of our slow roller here. And then we're not gonna go above 500, so this is okay to stay here for right now. But we are gonna add a little bit more charcoal, and this will kind of funnel that heat to right where our Dutch oven's gonna sit. So come back in with the divide and conquer, and we're gonna go to the lower setting this time. We want to get up to like 350 to 400, so I'm just going to open the top for now to get the airflow going. Now the grill's coming up to temperature. We're going to get the rest of the ingredients prepped. We've already got our chili paste made, our brisket's ready to cube up, so we're just going to put together the rest of the base of this chili, which is essentially some onions and some seasoning, some garlic. But the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take those scraps of brisket that we trimmed off from the beginning and render that fat down so that we can start to cook our veggies in there. So while that fat's rendering down, just gonna go ahead and slice up this onion. We want 1 large yellow onion, should yield about 4 cups of sliced onion in the end. You could dice this up, you could slice it up, whatever you like. We're gonna go for a relatively thin slice, so eventually it's just gonna melt into the chili. So I'll take off the top and the bottom, and then we'll just go thin across the whole thing. Next, I've got 8 cloves of garlic. We're not gonna bother chopping these up. We're just gonna get the skins off of them, smash them down, and we'll throw them in just like that. And just like the onions, over time, these will just melt away into our chili. All right, so once you've got a couple tablespoons, probably got about 3 tablespoons of fat rendered out of here, we're just gonna remove these pieces, and now we've got a nice base to start cooking on. Come right in with our onions and our garlic. I'm just gonna hit this with a little bit of smoked salt right off the bat. hickory smoked salt to go with our hickory smoked brisket. And we're just gonna start to sweat these down. And I'm gonna bring the temperature up just a little bit, kind of medium high, to try and get a little bit of color on these onions. Well, we've got some nice browning going on our onions, so we're gonna move on. I'm gonna throw in 2 chipotles in adobo sauce. And again, skip this one if you wanna keep the heat level a little bit lower. I've got a tablespoon of Mexican oregano, a tablespoon of ground cumin, and a tablespoon of smoked paprika. And this instantly smells incredible. So the other thing we're gonna throw in for seasoning is 1 cinnamon stick. And then we can go ahead and get our brisket chopped up and thrown in here as well. So we've got our brisket here. What we want to do with this is just cut it into some larger cubes so that these cubes can braise down, and eventually they're just going to be fall apart tender. So almost think of we're talking about a little bit bigger size than like burn-in cubes. Take a look at the brisket. Tons of juice in there. Just hasn't had time to break down yet. But we're gonna finish that process in the braise. So we're piling the brisket on. We've got that great bit of fat cap on there that's also gonna melt down, add a lot of flavor to our chili. Don't wanna miss out on any of that juice that came off the board. So there's tons of flavor in there too. So we got the brisket just coated in all those seasonings. Everything's mixed around. I'm gonna add in our chili paste, or our chili base. And that's it, guys. No beans, no tomatoes. And I've seen some Texas chilies with tomatoes, but this one is all about the chili and the carne, which is really the base of what chili is, chili con carne. So we're gonna keep it simple. That's our focus. All we need now is a little bit of braising liquid. So we're gonna start our braising liquid with 1 cup of coffee. Nice, strong black coffee. We're gonna add to that 1 bottle of Shiner Bock beer. What's up, Texas? And then we're gonna cover it all with beef stock. So I've got a full quart here. Chances are we'll end up going through all of it, but for now I'm gonna start with about 3 cups just to get everything covered. And what's gonna happen is as that liquid starts to cook down with the lid off, it'll reduce a bit, it'll expose some of the brisket on top, and we'll get even more color on top of that. The brisket's actually gonna start to bark up from the top. Eventually we'll probably throw a lid on this so that we can really break that brisket down, but we've got a couple hours of cooking ahead of us, so let's get it back on the grill. So right there, back on the grill, dead center. We're gonna close this up, cook it away, 350 to 400. Well, our chili has been simmering away for about an hour now, so we're gonna check on it. I wanna show you some of the color on the top, and at this point we're ready to add a little bit more liquid, throw the lid on so it can really pressurize what's going on inside and break down the brisket just a little bit faster. So you can see some of that color on top that I was talking about. I've actually stirred this a couple of times, so as we roll this around, you're kind of getting some of that color on these chunks of brisket. But you can also see how the liquid level has really dropped. It's been evaporating and reducing down. So we're gonna add a bit more beef stock to cover this up. I'm gonna finish off that quart. You can always add some water after that if you need to. But we'll throw the lid on and let it finish up. Well, it's been another hour and a half or so, and the meat's finally getting super tender, so I wanna show you guys what to look for. As you can see, we're still simmering away here, and as I pull my fork through here, I'm starting to see some of this meat break apart, and I'll show you what we're looking for. Let's grab one of these guys. Try it again. All right, take 2. So when you grab a couple forks here, these should pull apart pretty easy, starting to just shred. That's how we know that this is done. And that's how we want this meat to end up in the end. Shred it apart, and as it shreds apart here in the liquid, it just starts to soak all that chili goodness up. We're ready to pull this off. So we're just gonna give everything a stir and start to break these cubes down. If you want to, you can use your forks to kind of shred stuff up a little bit, but it should be pretty easy work at this point. You don't have to shred all of these up either. You wanna put some of those in a bowl, leave some texture behind. It's a good idea. Glad you thought of it. So let's go ahead and plate up a bowl. There's our cinnamon stick. Don't need that anymore. Incredible aroma coming off of it right now. You can see how rich it is just in that deep dark color that we've developed on our chili. I'm gonna top it all off with a little bit of sharp cheddar, some queso fresco, and some fresh diced onions. Let's give it a try. Just melts in your mouth. Such rich, earthy flavors. That's why you don't mess with Texas, because that is right on point. I love the fresh little crunch from the onion, but there's so much depth of flavor in the chili itself. I've got a gentle heat going around my mouth. This really isn't gonna blow out your taste buds, but it's got just the right amount of heat, especially right there on the back end. The onions have completely melted away. There's a nice garlic presence, but it's not overpowering because it's been just braising in there for so long. The Texas brisket chili, it's a labor of love, but well worth the effort and the time that you put into it. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please do us a solid, head over to allthingsbbq.com to check out all the products featured in today's video, or just click that link in the video description down below. If you enjoyed the recipe, hit the subscribe button. And if you have any questions or comments, or there's anything you'd like to see me cook, let me know in the comment section down below, and let's be good to one another. For more recipes, tips, and techniques, head over to allthingsbbq.com/thesauce. All Things Barbecue, where barbecue legends are made.